Rightio, obviously you've heard a lot of people recently talk about double threshold, the Norwegian method, the threshold model, whatever you want to call it, but a lot of people just don't really know how to implement it. And like, what's the progression from, if you have been training, I guess, a bit more traditionally, how do you actually progress up to a double threshold? I guess there's a few key points I would like to make as someone who has, I guess, progressed up to the double threshold. Volume is key, right? So the threshold model is going to allow you to run more volume. But before you really implement it, you need to make sure you can handle, I guess, yeah, not just big threshold sessions, but you need to be able to handle overall volume. So if you're not running approximately like 110, 120K a week, I wouldn't even kind of think about doing double threshold yet. Just put it something in the future that, you know, you can progress up to that very soon. My kind of progression would be, yeah, just say at the moment you're running 80K a week, I would, yeah, just do quite big volume single sessions. So you can honestly do 8 to 12K worth of volume at threshold, whether that's aerobic threshold, anaerobic threshold, a mix of both is honestly a really good way to do it. So I guess a sample of that would be for your Tuesday session, you might start with 8x1K of 60 seconds recovery at aerobic threshold. So it should be pretty comfortable.
Just a little intermission to elaborate on what Hanso said. And basically, LT1 is, you know, closer to your marathon, half marathon pace, depending on what level you're at. And then LT2 is going to be closer to your 10K to half marathon pace, depending on where you're at. If you're fitter, it's going to be your half marathon pace. If you're slightly newer, it's going to be your 10K pace. Now, with that being said, Matt talked about how you can mix it up, like mix the two types of LTs into one session. And one way to incorporate that is by doing something like 8x1K, 12x1K, starting at LT1 and progressively building towards LT2, but not going quicker than that. And because a lot of LT1 reps tend to be longer, because it is a bit slower, you can do like your longer reps at the start of the session and then progress on to shorter reps later on where you are hitting LT2 pace. And because it is shorter reps, you can actually go quicker as well and play around with that. The example I gave about doing an 8x1K starting at LT1 and ending at LT2 is pretty basic, so I'm going to give you another example where you can mix the two. This is kind of like a sandwich workout, but you can do 3x6 minutes at LT1 with 60 seconds recovery, followed by 5x2 minutes at LT2 with 30 seconds recovery, and LT2 is going to be quicker, of course, but you can finish that off with 12 minutes at LT1, which might be like marathon pace. And that would mean that you get a bit of LT1, LT2, and back to LT1. And obviously 12 minutes at LT1 is going to be slower than 6 minutes at LT1, so the two LT1 paces are going to be different, therefore you hit a lot of different paces in the workout, which is just going to be good for adding a bit more stimulus. As a general rule of thumb, obviously kind of context dependent, but LT1 is going to be like your 1K reps all the way up to 2K, maybe even 3K if you're running a lot of mileage. And then your LT2 reps are going to be like your 1 minute reps, minute and a half, 2 minute, 3 minute, 400 meters, 600 meters, that sort of thing. But yeah, obviously threshold pace is going to be dependent on the length of the rep, because your lactate levels do accumulate over time. So therefore, no matter what tempo pace you're running, your lactate levels are going to accumulate over time. But that is why threshold intervals are good, because you can actually go up to a certain stage and then drop down by resting, and then you can go back up again, which does allow you to work at a slightly higher intensity, which gives you the biomechanical benefit of going faster as well. 400 meter reps at threshold is actually pretty quick, and you wouldn't be able to hold that for ages, but because you're only doing it for 400 meters before you get a bit of rest to let your lactate levels go down, you can actually go quicker. We'll make a whole video on this another day though, but that's all I wanted to say in this part of the video.
And then I guess, yeah, as you kind of progress, you might add a double on that day. So, you know, 8x1K in the morning, double. And then you might do, yeah, okay.
Is it double easy run?
Yeah, double easy run.
Yeah.
And then you might do, yeah, progress that up to 10x1K. And then you can go up to 12x1K. And yeah, obviously you can fill around the pace as well. What's key is volume, not the intensity. You can keep the intensity the same, just increase the volume. So yeah, I guess once you have kind of been able to progress these big single sessions, that's when you might start implementing a very simple double threshold where you might do something like, you know, 4x6 minutes in the morning, of 60 seconds recovery, and then 5x3 minutes in the afternoon. Morning session being LT1 aerobic threshold, PM session being LT2 anaerobic threshold. But as I said, make sure you're running at least 120K a week and you can handle that before you kind of implement it. And you might be like, oh, why? Like if I'm doing a double easy run, isn't that kind of the same thing? It isn't. If you take into account warming up, warming down, all that kind of stuff, these threshold days can be up to, I would say the smallest one I've done is 26K. So if you're doing 26K in one day and you're only doing 100K a week, also do your second session for the week, which might be 15K, and then a long run, you're only going to be able to run 8K on your easy days. And where the threshold model, the beauty of it is how much volume it allows you to run. Because these days are so big that, yeah, you can just bank huge Ks for the week. And that's really where the magic is. Volume is going to be where you're going to see the most improvement. We're in an aerobic sport. The more we can develop that aerobic system, that aerobic capacity through, yeah, threshold running, easy running, that kind of thing, that's where we're going to get the best improvement. So I think it's, yeah, really just making sure you understand that before, yeah, you start doing anything silly with double threshold. For example, I've got a kid who's doing 100K a week at the moment. He's 17 years old, which is pretty high mileage for a 17-year-old. But yeah, he's really keen on doing double threshold. But you know, I'm holding him back, but I'm still increasing his volume over time, gradually. And then hopefully in the next year or two, we can start adding in these small double thresholds. And yeah, it's one of those things that, yeah, you want to progress up to it. You don't just want to, yeah, get straight into it. Because yeah, you don't want to risk getting injured or that kind of stuff. Rightio, so I've kind of locked in, and when I was explaining how you can implement like the threshold model, I forgot to explain as well, you don't need a lactate meter. And I probably should also describe what the pace should feel like, because feel is the most important thing in distance running. Your brain is so much better at recognizing what's going on internally than we give credit for, and it might even be better than a lactate meter itself. So LT1 or aerobic threshold, or that morning session, should be about a pace you can hold for like 2 hours. So that kind of feel. So obviously when you're doing intervals though, it's relative to the interval. So that's like why interval running tempos and threshold intervals are better, because you can etch that threshold further forward without accumulating as much lactate at a faster pace. But what is it supposed to feel like? LT1, you should finish that session thinking you can do another 2 to 3 reps. Anaerobic threshold should be a pace you can hold for about an hour. So obviously that's going to be a little bit harder, but same thing, like you should finish the session being like, oh, I can do another rep or something like that. If you watch the workout video, obviously like I tested pretty high, like a 3.8, that was a threshold session. But I was thinking in the last, you know, 2K of that session, I was like, okay, if someone had a gun to my head, how much longer could I hold it for? And I said I could hold it for another, you know, 6K, right? Which is kind of where you want to be. So that feel aspect of running is super important, and feel should be always coming first before data. So yeah, no, hopefully that kind of explains what the feel should be like. But honestly, another really important thing to realize is it should be relative to the day as well. Just say like today, for an example, you know, it's a Friday, I've had, you know, 4 days of pretty high volume running. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to run a 66 half marathon today. Like my threshold isn't going to be 3:10s. It's going to be 3:16, 3:17, because that, like on the day, like this is what my race pace would be. So really think about that as well. It's all relative to the day as well. So yeah, no, that was another yap, but yeah, hopefully that kind of clears up any of those things I kind of missed in that clip before.